All right, Dad. Here's number 99 in Joe Posnanski's 100 all-time greats, in which the numbering is somewhat arbitrary. Mike Mussina. Some years ago, a baseball executive of some renown was explaining the excellence of Mike Mussina, and he said something that I will never forget. He said, "You know what? The best way I can describe Moose is, the guy is just a mensch." That's a complicated scouting report. Mensch is a fascinating word. It's a Yiddish word, and its meaning is hard to fully capture. Mensch literally translates to human being or person. In the classic musical Fiddler on the Roof, Tevye the milkman talks about how his son-in-law Motel hasn't matured, and he says, "This Motel is a person." He means mensch. I don't think the translation works quite there. The more common definition of mensch is a person of integrity and honor, but this doesn't do much better at getting to the true meaning of the word. A person of integrity and honor sounds like a war hero, an honest politician, a philanthropist, a person who spends life in the service of others. These people are mensches, certainly, but mensches don't have to be any of those people. Leo Rosten, in The Joy of Yiddish, defines a mensch as someone to admire and emulate, with the key being nothing less than character, rectitude, dignity, a sense of what is right, responsible, decorous. That's better, but perhaps it's better to define mensch by using examples. A mensch is someone who, when they borrow your car or lawnmower, returns it filled up with gas. A mensch sends you a thoughtful handwritten note after interviewing you, even if you didn't get the job. A mensch stands up to defend you when you're not around. A mensch leaves a note in the windshield if they tap or dent your car. A mensch goes back to the table to leave a few extra bucks because they feel like the tip left by the group was too small. A mensch tells your manager or boss when you did a good job. A mensch is the person who always brings a gift, surprises you by remembering your birthday, knows your kids' names, bonus mensch points for knowing the dog's name too, offers to take a photo when seeing people struggling with their group selfie, and always remembers to pass along the promised book or recipe or recommendation. In other words, a mensch is someone who tries to do the right thing, the kind of person many would call a sucker. But that doesn't bother the mensch. He or she isn't perfect, far from it. A mensch makes as many mistakes as the next person. A mensch is the person who apologizes for those mistakes, makes up for them, keeps striving to do better in situations both large and small. As you can see, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the word mensch, also the French phrase l'esprit de l'escalier, which is literally the wit of the staircase. But it really just means thinking of the perfect retort too late. The closest thing we have in English is the jerk store called. I love learning about non-English words that don't quite translate. Okay, was Mike Mussina a mensch? Like I said, it's complicated. As a pitcher, a mensch is an excellent description of Mussina. He more or less did everything right. The fact that it took him way too long to get elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame is a celebration of his menschiness. He never did anything for show, he just played. Look at him this way. Mussina's a stats geek who didn't play for stats, a New York Yankee who loathed attention, a pitcher who finished top 6 in the Cy Young voting 9 times but never won the thing, a starter who took 5 no-hitters into the 8th inning but never threw a no-hitter, a guy who won 20 games for the first time as a 39-year-old and promptly retired rather than go for 300 victories, and he finished with 270 as a consequence. He made it to the Hall of Fame despite a bold unwillingness to do anything extra to improve his chances of making it to the Hall of Fame. Mussina was a brilliant high school pitcher in Montoursville, Pennsylvania, one town over from Williamsport, home of the Little League World Series. Milwaukee special assistant Doug Melvin was an Orioles scout then, and he saw Moose pitch and was blown away. Melvin said Mussina was an 18-year-old who pitched like he was 28. Moose had an advanced way of thinking about pitching. He saw it as a puzzle. Mussina's always been a puzzle guy, crossword puzzles and such. He always tried to think of the optimal way to keep hitters off balance, to make them uncomfortable. With his stuff and with his mind, nobody in high school could touch him. His father, Malcolm, a lawyer, told scouts not to draft him. Mike was going to Stanford. The mensch thing to do. Melvin's scouting report was so over the top that the Orioles drafted him in the 11th round anyway, on the off chance they could get him to change his mind. They did not change his mind. Moose graduated from Stanford with a degree in economics in 3.5 years. And the Orioles drafted him again, this time in the 1st round. Those college years probably didn't affect his career much. He made just 28 minor league starts before getting his first big league start in Chicago at age 22. He went 7 2/3 innings, allowed 4 hits and 1 run, a Frank Thomas homer, and he took the loss. That more or less captures the vibe of his career. Brilliant, a bit unlucky, and an aversion to fame all thrown together into one stew. Sorry, I have to pause for a second here. Have you seen the photo of Mussina that's on his baseball reference page? I can't stop looking at it. There is the photo, Dad, in question. Could he possibly look less happy to be here? That's not a just take the frickin' picture already glare. It's more like a what's the point of life anywhere look. Anyway look. The photo perfectly describes Mussina's general posture as a pitcher. Even as he pitched in the big and historic baseball markets of Baltimore and New York, he never stopped being an introverted and small-town kid. He never grew comfortable with the off-the-mound stuff that goes with being a star big league pitcher. He wore this face a lot. I see him with that sourpuss, Don Zimmer once said, and I say, how's your personality, Moose? This hardly sounds like a mensch, I realize. Mussina didn't like dealing with the media for much of his career. He wasn't especially friendly with teammates. He could come across as rude and distant. He talked openly about how he had to put himself first to succeed. Some days I can't, he tried to explain about his distaste for talking with the media. Some days I won't because I know that I'm in the wrong frame of mind. I'll be short, it'll come out wrong. For Moose, this was simply another puzzle to solve. His job was to pitch well year after year, decade after decade. He had to figure out the best way to do his job. He didn't like the spotlight, didn't like the barrage of questions, didn't think that answering questions about his mindset was helpful to his pitching. And this is the hardest part to explain. He needed to feel ordinary in order to pitch well. He was never happy when people looked at him differently. When he went home to Montoursville and could feel like himself again, he opened up. He was involved in every charity imaginable, coached the junior varsity basketball team, raised money for scholarships for kids around town, all of that mensch stuff. Here, I'm just Mike, he said happily. In the big leagues, though, he couldn't be just Mike. I think the way I've looked at it, he told Newsday's Ken Davidoff, is I'm not going to please everybody all the time. I'm better off making sure that my state of mind is okay before I worry about everybody else's state of mind. I'm the guy who has to go out and do this. In other words, he realized that pitching lousy was not an option. And all that other stuff like opening up and being available to talk and smiling when he wasn't happy could lead to him pitching lousy. So he simply didn't do that stuff. And he rarely pitched lousy. The list of near misses in Mike Mussina's career is long and legendary, and when taken all together, strangely touching. There's a melancholy aura about Mussina's career. In 1992, he went 18-5. He would have won 20 games except for the 8 quality starts he pitched that led to a loss or a no decision. He finished 4th in the Cy Young voting behind Dennis Eckersley, whose wins above replacement that year was 2.9, whereas Moose's was 8.2. In 1994, he was 16-5 and would have been a near lock for 20 wins had the players' strike not canceled the rest of the season. He again finished 4th in the Cy Young voting. In 1995, he went 19-9 and would probably have won 20 had that season not been shortened because of the lockout. He finished 5th in the Cy Young voting. In 1996, Mussina did not pitch well. It was, in his own mind, his worst season. But he still won 19 games and still finished 5th in the Cy Young voting. And he had a clear chance at his 20th win in his last start in Toronto. He threw 8 innings, allowed 1 run, left with a 2-1 lead. Armando Benitez blew it in the 9th by allowing a homer to Moose's old college teammate Ed Sprague, and that was that. In 1997, Mussina had a perfect game going with 1 out in the 9th inning. Cleveland only managed 5 balls out of the infield when he got a 1-1 fastball just a touch up to Sandy Alomar, who lined it over Cal Ripken's head into left field for a single. Mussina struck out the last 2. He threw maybe 3 pitches that they could hit all night. Hall of Famer Jim Palmer told Ken Rosenthal. A high changeup to David Justice. He didn't get the ball in enough to Sandy. Maybe it was 2 pitches they could hit. How do you do that? That October, he was brilliant in the postseason. In 2 starts against Cleveland in the ALCS, he allowed 1 run in 15 innings. He didn't get the win in either of those games. The second start was Game 6. Mussina allowed 1 hit in 8 innings, no runs. He struck out 10, but he just gave up a homer in the 11th, and the Tribe went on to the World Series. In 2001, now with the Yankees, he was probably the best pitcher in the American League. He led the league in FIP, F wins above replacement, B wins above replacement, and situational wins saved, none of them which existed or mattered to Cy Young voters in 2001. He lost the Cy Young to his teammate Roger Clemens, despite having somewhat obvious advantages, such as a lower ERA, more strikeouts, fewer walks, more complete games, more shutouts, etc. But he didn't just lose to Clemens. He finished 5th in the voting and didn't get a single first-place vote because he had a 17-11 record. That same year, he took another perfect game into the 9th inning at Fenway Park. This one would prove even more heartbreaking. He got 2 outs and had 2 strikes in Carl Everett. Moose threw a high fastball to Everett, more or less where he was trying to get it. Everett fought it off and singled on a soft liner to left. I'm going to think about that pitch till I retire, Mussina.